Hey everyone, welcome to another great episode of Coding with Dogs. My name is Craig. Oliver, you want to say anything to the peoples? He doesn't care about you. Anyway, so this is going to be a really great episode because we're going to start diving into user interaction. So the user event package offered by React Testing Library is an incredible tool. It makes it very simple to simulate user interaction with your components that mirrors the exact behavior that will occur at runtime. This is the area where RTL really crushes what Enzyme used to offer. So without any further ado, let's dive into it. All right, in this episode, we're going to be using the actual test project that I wrote for the very first time. You can run it using PnPm start, and as you can see, it's the simple mock social media app. So the part we're going to be focusing on for this lesson is our registration page right here. This is a dummy registration page. It doesn't actually do anything. I hit submit. I just get some JSON output down here. But really, the purpose of this is to give us a variety of different form controls so I can demonstrate the wide range of options for interacting with a page. Now, we're going to start with a really simple one. We are going to do a text field. Specifically, we're going to fill in the email address in this email field right here. Over here in our code, we're going to start by creating our test file. So, first we're going to have our test, fill in the email field. Now, the first thing to do, as always, is to render our registration component. This puts it on the screen. And then we need the screen import. Now, if we want to fill in the email field, the first thing we need to do is select it. Now, we learned in a previous lesson about a variety of selectors. Because the form here follows good HTML semantics, meaning each control has an associated label element, we can just do screen get by label text email, and that will get us the email input. Now that we have it, we need to fill it out. Now, when a user fills out a field, what they are doing is they are typing a string of characters into it. RTL focuses exclusively on those kind of high-level user actions, such as typing. And it does this through the user event package. User event is, like the name suggests, designed to recreate those high-level user interactions that you want to validate in your tests. And user event has a helpful function called type. Into type, we pass our email input, and then we pass the text we want to go. So I'll put in johndoe@gmail.com. And actually, I'm going to extract this into its own variable, because then I can pass this in to type. And then after we type, we're going to want to make sure that it's actually present in the input field. And to do that, we're going to use another one of those Jest DOM matchers called toHaveValue. Email, not email, input. And this is going to assert that the input field has a value property of email. Now you can hear Chloe making noise in the other room right now. Now we are almost all the way there. There's one piece that is missing. The user event package, every single action is asynchronous in order to handle various things that have to happen behind the scenes. So to make the user event.type work completely, we have to make our entire test async and await the type function. So now if I run this, as you can see, our test passes. This was all we had to do to type into an input field and validate that the value was present. If you're used to Enzyme, you're probably going to be really impressed by how few lines of code we accomplished this in. One other thing I want to call out is we did not use the act function anywhere here. React testing veterans are probably familiar with the act function, which you're supposed to use anytime that you change any state-related things in your component. Now, RTL has act built into it, and so you almost never have to use act directly in your RTL tests because it will do it for you automatically. Now that we know the core of how to interact with an input field, let's look at how these simple steps can be repeated to handle a variety of additional form controls. So let's move on to our daily post limit. This here is a number field. Interacting with a number field is extraordinarily similar to interacting with a text field. So I'm just going to clone this test real quick. Daily post limit field. And so our post limit will be 1, 2, 3, A, B, C. And you'll see why in a moment. So we're going to get by label text again, but instead of email, we're going to get daily post limit. Post limit input here. We're going to type post limit into there. But something very different is going to happen. Watch what happens when I run this with the exact value we're typing in. The test fails. It fails because this is a number input, and number inputs are restricted to only number values. And so I can change this to just 1, 2, 3, and the test will still fail. Because for a number input, the value is automatically stored as type number behind the scenes. So we just have to make this a number, and voila, everything passes. So now we've looked through 2 different ways of interacting with a field via typing. Next on the list is an even more basic function, the click. The ability to click on this checkbox and check and uncheck it. So let's do this again. Let's grab just the title this time. Check the notification checkbox. Like before, we're going to get by label text. And for the record, get by label text with these controls is so reliable because of how well formed the HTML syntax is here. If you're dealing with less well formed HTML, you'll have to use other selectors to accomplish it. We've got our notification checkbox. And just like to type into the checkbox, we would want to do user event dot type. To click, we're going to do user event dot click. And like before, we're going to do an await on it. And now we want to check the value of our notification checkbox. Now, a checkbox does not have a value property, it has a checked property. And so there is a to be checked option that RTL provides via the JSDOM package. Now, one thing I want to point out, this checkbox is actually checked by default on this page. So after clicking on it, we expect it to not be checked. And just to be extra OCD about this, we're going to do a to be checked assertion before we click. And if I run this, you will see our test passes. The next major form control you're going to encounter on a regular basis is the select box. You see it down here with user type, where it can be chosen as standard or admin. Now, select boxes are a little different, but not substantially so. So let's go back to the code and see how we're going to interact with a select box. So once again, we're just going to do a little copy paste. Gonna nuke some of this. Select the user type. The label will be user type. Yes. All right. Now, the first area where a select box is going to be different from the input fields we've dealt with before is in how its value is represented. Let's do a quick little inspection on this. See if I can zoom in a little bit to make it easier for y'all at home to see. So right now, with a select box, we have our two options, and the options actually have two different types of values. There's the value attribute, which in this case you see standard with a lowercase s, and then there's the value that is visible to the user, the display value, which is where you have standard with an uppercase s. Now when it comes to doing assertions on the select box, if we use our handy dandy to have value, we need to use standard with a lowercase s. This is the literal value of the selected option. However, we also can do to have display value, and there we're asserting on the value that is visible to the user, which means standard with an uppercase s. Now if we run the test right now, you'll see that both of these pass. Now, there is no right or wrong way, whichever one that you use is a matter of preference. I just wanted to show that both of these options exist. Now, to interact with the select, you might first think it's going to be super hard. After all, we click, and then we click again on something completely different, and that changes the value. However, because this is such a common scenario, RTL tries to make it super easy for us. The user event package offers a select options function. For this, we pass in our select element, and now we need to specify the literal value, not the display value. So admin, because we want to change it with a lowercase a, and like everything, we await on it. And once this runs, the value will change from standard to admin. And there we go. All done. Now there is one more form of basic user interaction that I want to cover in this video, and that is hovering. Now, we have our hover output title right here, and if I move my mouse over it, you see the text is hovering appears below. I move my mouse off of it, and it disappears. This is another common user interaction scenario, and yet again, RTL makes this incredibly easy to do. We are just going to copy and paste our previous test and clear out the extra stuff. We're testing hovering. And so the first thing we want to do is we want to grab our hover output title text. Now, because this is not a form control, let's use a different selector. Let's use get by role. Now, this element right here is an H2. So we can actually use the implicit accessibility role of heading to grab this element. And because headings have different levels, get by role supports a level property, which we can set to 2. Now, if you're thinking this seems to be a kind of an implementation detail, you're very close to the mark. The one kind of gray area in RTL when it comes to user experience versus implementation details is accessibility. RTL considers anything that is a part of the accessibility spec as a user experience detail rather than implementation detail. And headings and the levels are very much a part of the accessibility spec. Anyone who's had to deal with strict 508 accessibility requirements is very much aware that the order of the numbers of your headings is extremely important. One more thing that we can do to further narrow it down, get by role supports a name property. This name represents the accessible name that the screen reader will see. What the name will be varies based on the accessible element you're trying to select. In this case, for a heading, it will be the visible text. So this will be hover output. So now we have the hover output title. Now, I could try to hype up how doing a hover action seems like it would be so difficult, but at this point, you're probably aware that RTL is going to make our job super easy, and you are correct. the user event package has a hover function. If I pass in the hover output title, and of course I do an await on it, we will now simulate a hover mouse action over this element. The next thing we need to do is do an assertion on the impact that this hovering has. Now remember, we're trying to assert that a given element is and is not visible. And so if we're dealing with an element that may or may not be present, we can use the query by selector to do this. And of course, the text we are querying by is hovering. Now, before we hover, we expect is hovering not to be visible. And after hovering, we expect is hovering to be visible. If I run this again, everything passes. Now that we're hovering over this title, how do we get out of it? How do we unhover? Yet again, super easy, because there is just an unhover function. Nice and simple. So if we unhover this title, the text will cease to be visible, which is the exact result we get here. And there you have it, folks. Now, I hope that in this lesson, if you've got a lot more experience with Enzyme than you do with React Testing Library, you're beginning to appreciate, oh, excuse me, you want attention? Anyway, I hope you're trying to appreciate the, value. Oh my God, look at him. The value that RTL offers. The main thing is, if you've primarily worked with Enzyme, I'm sure you've seen how painful it is to simulate the kind of user interaction that we're able to do so easily with RTL. Now this is it for the basics, the videos that are covering, all the core functionality that RTL has to offer. After this, we're going to start going into more advanced concepts, mocking, various edge cases that you might run into, test planning and design, all of these things that are really important for building real-world tests on large-scale enterprise applications. If you've enjoyed the content, as always, wag your tail, like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Have a good day. Oliver, Chloe.